Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Finding Your Way with Lori and Tonya. We are so excited you are here. If you are a new listener and you've just found us, listen, we wholeheartedly believe that there are no coincidences. You are here for a reason. There's something in the show for you today. If you are a return listener, we really appreciate you supporting us and being here with us. And we ask that, if you think that there's somebody who could use this message or any of our messages, please share, like, and subscribe. Let people know about us and about this. Our full mission is just to give everybody else what it took us so long to find ourselves. And so really that is the reason that we're doing this. And I'm super excited about our topic today because it's a topic that most of us can relate to, especially women and especially Southern women. So it's something that Lori and I have had a hard time coming to terms with, but it's so easy. And when you start doing it, it's kind of contagious. So today we're going to talk about asking for what you want. Literally just ask for what you want. It's that simple.
It sounds so simple, but how many times do we not do it? I feel like we go through life sometimes and we expect people to be able to read our minds and they should just know what I want. They know me. They should just know what I want and, get all put out when people don't act the way we want them to act or whatever. I know that's my story, but it truly is. How often do we think about, have we expressed ourselves? Have we actually asked for what we want versus assuming that other people know what we want? And this goes for everything in life. I mean, marital relationships is a big one, but any kind of relationship, whether that's at work or in a store, or just simple things like, one of the first times we heard about this was with our mentor, Jack Canfield. And, something as simple as he went to a conference and they gave him a yellow folder and he hated yellow. And he was stewing on it. Like he was in his mind stewing on that thing. Like, I hate yellow. I'm stoked with yellow folder all day. And it almost like he flipped a switch and was like, hey, can I have a blue folder? And they're like, sure you can. And gave him a blue folder. Otherwise, he would have been miserable all day thinking about that because to him, that was important, right? He in his mind was telling himself a story about this folder that to the guy next to him made no difference whatsoever, but it was important to him. And all he had to do was ask for them to trade it out. And then his whole day went differently because he did that. And so it's something that simple all the way up to really big things.
Well, and I think you start with the little things, and those are the things that, if we're dialing it down to the little things, the blue folder, the green toothbrush, the extra vacation day when you need something from your boss. Like if you think about the little things, I think where it comes into play, especially for me and probably for you too, lawyers, is our upbringing, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want to be viewed as needy or bougie. That's our kids' words now, or high maintenance. We don't want to put anybody out. So we will suffer through some really small things that are really big to us, but that we could have just asked for. Mm-hmm. I've done it before where I bought something and it didn't work. And instead of asking for an exchange when they said no exchanges or asking for my money back, I've just suffered through and sucked it up. And I didn't want to be that person and just kept it and lost my money and then stewed on it and felt bad about, well, gosh, that was such a waste. But I could have said, you know what, would there be any way that you would consider? Because here's the deal. It's always a no unless you ask.
That's right.
And then it could be a yes or a no. Yes. And if it's a no, don't be tied. Just ask. You hadn't gotten anywhere if you don't ask. It's always a no. So if you ask and it's a yes, hot dog, way to go. And if it's a no, all right, well, at least you know the real answer. And you can live with that sometimes a little better too, that you did at least ask and the answer was no. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in my job, I do a lot of grant writing. I can't even tell you the number of grant applications I've written in all my career, but it really is going into it with that attitude of what a grant application is you're asking for money from a funder, right? And so you have to ask for what you want. And I always tell people, the answer is no if I don't put the application in. So I can do a little bit of work and make the ask. And if the answer is still no, that's okay. It wasn't meant for us, right? But at least I tried, and I asked for what I needed or felt like I wanted. And so, it really is that same concept for everything. It's like, what are we asking people? I know in my marriage, a lot of times I do expect my husband to read my mind. And he expects me to read his mind, and he keeps throwing it up to me a lot recently. He's like, don't y'all always talk about you need to ask for what you want? Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm asking you for what I want. And it might not be something that I give in on, but at least he's asked, right? So a big thing with me is I love it when he drives. It makes me feel special. It makes me feel like we're on a date or a special occasion. And so I always want him to drive. And I get a little bit put out when he doesn't, because he knows that it makes me feel good, right? But when we do ask, we do have to let go of the outcome, because, you can't stew on it and not ask and, feel bad because you haven't asked. But you also don't want to feel bad when you do ask, right? If it doesn't turn out the way that you want it. So it's almost just, doing what you can, which is making the ask, and then letting go of what comes to be from that.
Well, and I'll tell you, so, those of you who've listened to us before know I'm a recruiter, right? So companies ask me to find them talent, and I go out and find folks. And so I also do the negotiation between the offer and the acceptance. And so what I'm finding is, in the last 4 or 5 years, this millennial group of people, they have the ask down. Like, it is amazing what they will ask for. Things that my generation would never have even considered. So they want $5,000 more, but you know what? I'll forego the $5,000. I want 5 extra days of vacation. Gosh, 5 days, that's huge when your vacation policy is 2 weeks. But vacation, to especially that group, they like to travel. They don't work to live. Or don't live to work, they work to live. Whereas our generation's a little different. That's not how we were brought up. And so they don't mind the ask. And it's interesting to me what they will ask for, and how bold they are about it. And honestly, it took me a little while to get comfortable with it, because I'm having to really do the ask, right? So it's their ask, but I'm having to do it to my client who is my age and is going, wait a minute, what? We're not doing that. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Who are we talking about? How badly do you want them? It's like I'm having to finesse the ask. And so it's interesting that now I will even suggest that my candidate ask for something. Because if it doesn't feel good to them, then they're not going to accept it, or it's not going to be where they are for long. And so I really want to talk through, what do you want? And I try to do that on the front end, right? So you try to do that on the front end, but in the end, what's it going to hurt? All they can say is no. And so if I'm going back and saying $7,000 and 5 vacation days, and we get to a middle road, well, you've still won, because if you hadn't asked, you weren't getting any of it. And so maybe they give you 3 days and $2,000. Okay, it's more than you had because you asked. And so I think it's just as simple, but again, it's uncomfortable to some people to push back. It's uncomfortable to feel like you're asking for more than you're worth. And that's you, right? But it's interesting, because I feel like this younger generation is way better at the ask than I ever was, and than I may ever be.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we haven't expressed ourselves in the past because of that perceived judgment. Like, if I ask for something that nobody else has ever asked for before, or if I ask for something that supposedly is of great value, right? Like, it was almost like not asking because you feel like you're going to be judged for, like, who do you think you are? Like, who do you think you're worth that? That's a personal story. That doesn't have anything to do with who you're asking. That's a personal self-worth, self-value issue that I think is why we've stayed silent in the past, is because we weren't, part of this, you're not just going off asking for stuff willy-nilly, but it is part of the journey of getting in tune with yourself and getting in tune with what you really do want. You have to do those steps first. And then when you're making the ask, it's actually things you actually want, right? It's not just asking for the sake of asking, but it's being very clear on what's important to you and what would bring you value if you did get it. Right. And so it's not just about the ask, it's all the other things that we've talked about on this podcast that lead up to that, being comfortable finally asking for what you want once you've identified what that is.
Well, and I'll say, if we get into this a little bit more, a little deeper, and we talk about that romantic relationship, I will tell you that I spent years and years in a marriage that I'm no longer in. Most of you guys know that I expected, my expectation were huge. And I was expecting things from him that I never asked him for. I expected him to read my mind and know what it was I wanted. And so I've really kind of vowed, okay, next relationship, I've got to do better. I've got to communicate better, and I've got to ask for what I want. And what I have learned, seeing somebody and really looking at them and not being scared about being judged. I tend to be a little needy in a relationship. I like together time. And so I have to be forthcoming with anybody that I'm seeing. I have to say, this is my expectations. I like a good morning text and a good evening text. I like a phone call. Those things are important to me. And some people, they're not. I've got a coworker, when she and I talked about it when I first started dating, she was like, Tonya, that is not interested in her at all. Like, she's the one who hardly ever responds when she gets texts from her husband. Right. And so, but I know how important it is to me. And so being able to say that is my need. I'm going to ask for that up front, and I'm going to let go of me worried about you judging because maybe it makes me look needy. It is who I am who I am. I need what I need. If you think that that's needy, then you're not my guy. Next.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so I think we got to get really clear, but also upfront, and not be afraid of the judgment that comes with it. If it's what we need, it's what we need. And it's nobody's business to judge if our needs are okay or not.
Yeah. And you had the opportunity, because it was somebody that didn't know you, and now you're in a relationship, and you can do the asking from the very beginning of the relationship, so that you sort of have that communication outright. With me, I'm in a marriage, and it was like flipping a switch halfway through. It was like going from being not very communicative and not asking for what I want to getting really clear on what I want and starting to ask. And that rocks the boat a little bit, right? It's like, where is this coming from? Like, what is happening? Like, why are you asking for things you've never asked for before? And you have to work through that a little bit too, and like finesse that a little bit, and get to the point where you are not just asking, but almost going a little bit further and explaining why it's important to you, right? So that they feel like it's not coming out of the blue, but it's, now I'm clear on, this is what I want, and this is why I want it. This is how it makes me feel when you do this, or don't do that, or whatever. And just give the other person a little bit of grace on going down the journey with you, right? Not expecting them to meet your needs all of a sudden when you flip that switch, right? But having a little bit of grace with, this is new for them. Like, I'm asking for things I've never asked for before, and it may take a little bit of time for them to be okay with that.
That's right. Well, and you're exactly right. We started in two different places. Like, you literally flipped the switch, and Scott was like, wait a minute.
Who are you?
Right. When you become so vocal. And with me, I had already started doing the work, and then started seeing somebody. And then, pretty early on said, I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and I need this. And he didn't run for the hills, thank God. But there are some times still that I have to say, listen, like, you're not meeting this need. I'm struggling here because I've asked, you're not meeting it. Okay, where's my disconnect? And if you can't meet it, we got to discuss it. Let's talk about how we can come to some kind of terms, right? How do we meet in the middle? Because this is pretty important to me, but not to you. Where do we get where my need, I can downsize it a little bit, but you got to upgrade it's not important. And so I think that communication has been huge in getting there. But I think being upfront from the beginning and asking for what you want. I mean, it's just that simple.
And it really is a communication thing. So it's asking, but then it's also providing feedback when you get what you've asked for, right? And so I hear my husband's family talk all the time. When they were growing up, his sister always talks about how mama always made his favorite meal, right? He always made his favorite. She didn't ever make my favorite meal. Well, he asked for it all the time, and he provided feedback on, oh, mama, this is so good. I love this. So then it was that she felt appreciated for having, done what he asked her to do, right? Where, the sister, I don't know, but she may or may not have not even asked for what she wanted, right? And expected, and then felt a certain way when she felt like he was getting something that she wasn't getting or whatever. But how many times do we do that? Like, I know in my life I have just expected somebody to know what I want and then get a little bit put out when I don't get it, right?
Exactly. I think we've all done it.
Yeah.
Even the little things, like my mom making a sandwich when I'm at her house for whatever and not knowing what I want on it. But I didn't ask her. I didn't say, hey, here's what I want. Here's my ask. And then me going, I'm your daughter and you don't know what I like on a sandwich. She's like, no, I don't know. But I didn't ask. And then I get miffed about her not knowing. It's just simple. It's the little things, but you stop the fretting. You stop the lack of communication when you ask, but you also stop some of the suffering. How many times do we sit with a yellow folder for 3 days in a seminar and we're like, ugh, every time I see this, I think about a stoplight. Whatever it is. And you could have been sitting there with your serene blue folder the whole time. And the person that you asked did not give a crap which hand they gave you the folder from. They don't care.
Yeah.
So I think that it's the big things and the little things, but especially as Southern women, we just were told, you don't,
you get what you get.
You get what you get. You don't pitch a fit. And I have told my children that on more than one occasion back in the day. And I kind of go, maybe I was stifling their ask.